Hi, in this video, I'm going to show you how to locate the correct tables for Canadian macroeconomic data and show you the correct options to download real and nominal GDP into Excel. And then we're going to work in Excel to build the GDP components to construct and verify the textbook national account identity. All right, let's go. It can be hard to find the correct table in Statistics Canada. For example, if I'm looking for GDP, actually none of these first options are the ones that we need. What I would suggest is to use the link provided below in the description to this GitHub page where I provide the common links to macroeconomic series such as interest rates and inflation and GDP. And I also show you the options that are needed and what they're called in Statistics Canada to calculate nominal and real GDP, and also the components that are needed to sum up to calculate the national account identity. So if we go ahead and click on our link, we are taken to the Statistics Canada table that we actually need. Okay, now we found the correct table in Statistics Canada for GDP. And you can see here at the bottom, we have a little snippet of data where our different variables are rows and the different columns are dates. So there's two options to download data. The first is to use this little quick table we're given at the beginning. And you can see we have some options. So the important thing to know is that chained 2017 dollars is real GDP and current prices is your nominal GDP. Okay, so let's download real GDP. We always want our real GDP data to be seasonally adjusted. And I would suggest that you download all your data from as early as possible. So now we have our populated data table with our data going back further. And to download it, all we need to do is hit this first option to download it as a CSV. And I would suggest saving it as like a raw data table for real GDP. The other thing is if we wanted to download nominal prices, we would just hit current prices, then hit apply. And then once it populates, again, now we have our nominal data being populated and we could download that as our nominal raw GDP table. However, it's often convenient to hit this add remove click button, which will give us more options. So in particular, we have our option to, again, we want to download real GDP, seasonally adjusted, and we have to make sure that we get our data sample that we want. So let's do that. But the important thing here is it tells us all the different variables and its subcomponents of the national accounts. And in particular, you can see we have consumption, investment, changes in inventories, which is a component of investment, exports and imports, some discrepancy, and GDP. However, you'll notice that there's no government here. Why is that? Well, if we open consumption, government consumption is actually included as part of consumption, and government investment is actually being included as part of investment, which is not the way we want it for the textbook identity. So what are we going to do? Well, we're not going to download consumption and investment as provided. We're going to download the subcomponents. We also don't need further subcomponents like breaking down household expenditure into goods or services. And what we'll do is just download inventories, exports, imports, and GDP. And that's all we need. So we hit apply. And now we just have the data series that we need for the textbook national account components. So again, I'll download this as my real GDP data where I have only the variables I need. So I've gone ahead and double clicked my Excel file to open it. And you can see here now that we have all of the data we downloaded. We get a lot of extra information, which we don't need. So I will just go ahead and delete those rows. The other thing we should do is double check the variables that we've been given to make sure that we downloaded the correct series. It's hard to do correctly the first time. So here I purposely downloaded some extra series. You see our exports. We also managed to get the subcomponents, which we don't need. Same thing for imports and same thing for inventories. We got the business component, which we don't need. And in fact, all of these names now line up with the names on GitHub where you can see that, for example, household consumption and nonprofit consumption is what should add up to total consumption of the national accounts. So what we're going to do is just rename these enormous names to something a little more sensible. So I would suggest C_H for household consumption, etc. C_NP for nonprofit, and for government, we'll call it G_C because it's going to be part of our G. So I'll go ahead and rename those now. Okay, so I just finished renaming all of my variables. I've got these nice little clean variable names that I can use later. And what I want to do is hit Shift and right to select all of my variables because I actually don't want my data wide. I would prefer to have it long. So I hit right click, paste special, transpose, hit OK, and now it has copied and pasted my data and has transposed my series so that I have my variables as columns and then my rows are the different dates. Okay, so now we have all the different components. We want to sum up the aggregates. Let's start with consumption. So I select a cell that I want to edit. I hit equal. This allows me to put in a formula. And here, all I want to do is just sum up. So I add these two cells. And this is going to be my aggregate consumption. Similarly, my aggregate investment equal to business, nonprofit, and changes in inventories. And then my government is going to be equal to government consumption plus government investment. Now I've added up my subcomponents. So what I'm going to do is just show you this little trick where if I select all of these cells and they're up against the other data, I can double click the bottom right and it auto-populates that formula for the rest of my time series. Okay, here are my aggregates. I have exports and imports, GDP, consumption, investment, and government spending. So let's just double check that we have our correct GDP measure. So let's sum consumption, investment, government, exports, and subtract imports. So this should give me a number very, very close to the GDP. And you can see that it is. Now there is going to be some statistical discrepancy because of the chaining of the components, but you can see that this discrepancy is pretty small and that changes over time. Okay, so not a problem here. This is ready to upload into some software or to calculate our growth rates. So if I wanted to calculate a growth rate, let's say for GDP, I enter the formula and I select the current value of GDP. I'm now going to divide by the GDP value a year ago. So I'm doing a year-over-year growth rate. And here is my growth rate. And I want to put it in percent by multiplying by 100 and then subtracting by 100. Okay, that was a huge growth rate that year for GDP. So now you know how to find the correct tables in Statistics Canada, and I encourage you to check out the links in GitHub for the other macroeconomic variables. We also know how to clean up the data, how to sum columns and do basic calculations. So take your time, look at the data, calculate your own growth rates and summary statistics. I'll be posting videos on how to create beautiful tables and figures and how to upload this data into software. So please like and subscribe if you are interested in seeing those videos. Thank you so much.